This is Dr. Bob Fitrakis bringing you the other side of the news from WGRN 94.1. Here with my co-host, Mr. Dougan.
The other guy on the other side on the Green Renaissance here. It's another hot week in July, Bob. And we've got a guest today on this Friday in July. And we'll be discussing topics of higher authorities. Or as some people see it.
We've
got a...
All right. All right, we've got an atheist.
Yes, we do.
Does this look like a foxhole? You know about those atheists in the...
Well, this is not a foxhole, right? So therefore, we can have an atheist? Is that how that goes?
That's correct.
There's no atheist.
As long as it's... And we have
Frank
the
Zindler?
legendary Frank Zindler, who's for decades has fought on the cause of reason. Mr. Zindler, welcome to the other side of the news.
Thank you for having me back again. I really have enjoyed being with you the previous times and glad to be here again.
You come to the right, left place for a reason.
The right, left place?
Mm-hmm. And you've got a new book out?
Yeah, it is my autobiography in the form of 29 memoirs. I don't know whether it's going to be my last book, but I hope not. The title is Confessions of a Born-Again Atheist, The Implausible Lives of a Godless Guy. And wow. I do make my confessions in there.
Like St. Augustine?
Well, a little bit better. A little bit better.
You stayed on the side of reason.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I do appreciate your previous offer to appoint me Archbishop of Hippo, but...
That's right.
But I'll pass on that one.
Come the revolution, you'll be minister of reason.
There you go. Thank you.
So the book, as I understand it, and I've heard you read some of it on a couple of occasions and had the privilege early on when you were in the process of writing it. But again, there's some major revelations there too, and you deal with your issue of your own sexuality in the book.
Yeah, I come out of the closet at the age of 80. On my birthday party, no less. But it's in the book.
And I was there.
Yeah.
It was a grand affair.
A reveal.
It was. So maybe you can read us a little from your memoirs.
Well, thank you. I've selected two short excerpts. The first one is quite serious. I think, though, it really fits in with what I perceive to be the ethical focus and the social responsibility focus of you and your organization. And the other one is just a good fun. The serious
we like
one,
fun. We do.
Yeah, you like fun,
Fun's
I know.
When we're on the record, we're pro-fun.
Okay.
We don't even need God to have it.
I've said that for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
The serious one that I want to read is from a long memoir called Life on the Farm. And this one is called The Tomato Dump. Grandpa had just returned from the fruit market. The load of tomatoes was still on the truck. It was the second day he had taken the A1 beefsteak tomatoes to the giant farmers market in Benton Harbor, a market reputed to be the largest of its kind in the world. "The goddamn buyers are still fixing prices," he announced. "They won't pay me enough to pay for the cost of the baskets." The same thing had happened the day before, and it was not possible to sell ripe fruit more than 2 days after picking. That was because the fruit would become overripe during shipping, and it would spoil before reaching stores. Those were the days before the invention of the plastic tomato. The tomato that keeps forever, has no taste, and is practically the only kind of tomato known in the grocery stores and restaurants of America today. It's also the reason so many people don't like tomatoes. "I'm going to have to dump them and try again tomorrow with fresh ones." At the side of the barn, near the chicken coop, there already was a fermenting pile of tomatoes, fruit that had been rejected during the previous week. The new tomatoes splashed onto the decaying mass that was slowly sinking into the fertile soil at the edge of the plum orchard. About 900 large, beautiful tomatoes quickly formed a pile that covered the slimy mess to a depth of several feet. Grandma and I carried the emptied baskets into the front of the barn, the area to which pickers brought their fruit in order to be paid. That was the place where the fruit would be packed for transport to the fruit market. Lots of new tomatoes had already been brought in, so we all set to work putting the fruit artfully into the old baskets. Maybe we could sell them tomorrow. As we were packing tomatoes, an old station wagon jalopy, needing a muffler, drove noisily into the driveway between the farmhouse and the barn. The car came to a stop facing the tomato dump. For a while, the gaunt driver of the car stared at the tomatoes. Then he got out of the car and came to the barn to ask Grandpa if he needed pickers. Grandpa said he didn't need any more than those now working. The man looked stricken, like he had just received a death sentence. Looking again at the tomato pile as he walked slowly back to his car, he turned around and asked a favor. "My babies are awful hungry," he said. "They ain't eaten nothing in a couple of days. Would you mind if they ate some of them tomatoes over there?" Startled, Grandpa Smogy told him to go ahead and eat all they wanted. Like waifs escaping from Auschwitz, out of the car emerged 4 emaciated children. They descended upon the tomatoes like locusts landing on corn shucks. As they desperately devoured the fruit, tomato juice ran down their faces and stained the rags in which they were dressed. The mother got out of the car and joined them at the feast. Her cheeks, sunken and gray, clearly she also had not eaten for a long time. Even her fingers were wasted and skeletal. She, too, abandoned herself to consumption of the fruit that couldn't be sold. Finally, the husband joined the family and began to eat. As Grandma looked at the piteous spectacle, she burst into tears. "I've got better stuff for you to eat," she cried. As the family continued to eat, Grandma Smogy rushed into the house and began to cook. She fried up a dozen or so eggs along with numerous slices of ham. We normally did not allow pickers to enter our house, but this was an emergency. Everyone crowded into the kitchen, all 6, sitting around the metal-topped table, the same table on which Great-Grandma Vilwalk had made her noodles, the same table on which ball lightning had been seen to dance during thunderstorms. The children, 3 boys and a girl, ranged in age from 9 to 3. Everyone was given a large glass of fresh milk. Finally, as Grandma's feast filled up all the stomach space remaining atop the tomatoes, the father, mother, and the 3-year-old thanked Grandma for the food. Grandma looked quizzically at the 3 older children who had remained silent. "I knows they's thankful too," the father explained in obvious embarrassment. "None of 'em can talk except the youngest." And then he explained. "He's the only one what didn't get into the live. T'others thought it was a bottle of milk. None of 'em's been able to talk ever since." "You know," Grandpa told the father, "I think I could use some more pickers after all. I don't have anybody staying in my shanty yet this summer." The shanty was a 1-room shack placed near the center of our farm, beside the dirt roadway that bisected it. Most summers, the shanty was occupied by a husband and wife, without children. Now, for the first time ever, there would be children in the shack. Grandpa located several cots to put in the shanty, in addition to the double bed and the cook stove. Grandma found some hand-me-down clothes for the man and the woman. The children had to make do with the rags in which they had arrived for several days, until Grandma learned of a rummage sale in town where she bought some decent clothing for the kids. A rerun of The Grapes of Wrath was playing at the Liberty Theater in town that summer. Lots of people flocked to see the dramatic portrayal of a famine that had wrecked so many faraway lives. No one thought to give them any. The cotton feed sacks could be sewn up into simple dresses. Grandma did it all the time. But without a sewing machine, the mother would have no way to use them except as substitutes for suitcases. The mother and father thanked Grandpa and Grandma for giving them work and shelter for the summer, and everyone piled into the station wagon. It ran even louder now than when they had arrived seeking work. Like the little engine that could, the car slowly started to move. As it turned and came to face the spot where the tomato dump had been, it paused for a moment as the father briefly stared at the bare ground. Was the summer tugging him back to stay? Or was the coming winter trying to block his path? Ponderously, the vehicle started once again to move. It turned westward onto Nickerson Avenue and disappeared, never to return. There would be no John Steinbeck to speak for three wordless waifs, and they certainly would never find their own voices. They probably would outlive their parents. Without their parents, whose voice would speak for them? Their youngest brother? Had they ever been to a school? If they ever did go to school, what would they accomplish without speech? Would they ever learn to read and write? How would that be accomplished in Alabama or Mississippi? Would they live and die without ever having played a game or owned a toy?
Whoa. Thank you, Frank. Because that's a personal story about,
Yeah.
what we're seeing way too much of right now. And as we have on Bob and Suzanne have on the cover of the Free Press, the Trump camps and the migrants and the same story. And the same story being played over, and it was in one of my favorite books and films, Grapes of Wrath.
Oh, wow.
For myself, I've watched that movie a dozen times.
Yeah.
At least. I love when Henry Fonda spits, and then all the action really begins. But it's these stories are repeated over and over again with people struggling to survive, and somehow the Trumpsters just don't get it. They don't understand.
But
Go back where you came from.
While these three children literally had no voice, all of the people of whom you speak also have no voice.
Right.
There are a few that we learn about, that you learn about, that Bob learns about, but the vast majority of them are uncounted and have no voice.
Yeah, that's for sure. Oh, and I guess it's a good time as any to point out that there will be people gathering and raising their voices tonight, Friday night, at the State House. It's a vigil, the Lights of Liberty Vigil to end human detention. That goes on from 7 o'clock this evening down in the center of this village. So come on down, folks. I tell you what, that was really poignant.
Thank you.
And that was Benton Harbor, Michigan?
Benton Harbor, Michigan, yes, yes.
And how old were you when you witnessed?
I think I probably was 10 or at the most 11. I think I probably was 11. I think that was probably early in the summer that my father was killed in an electrical accident. But I couldn't nail it down absolutely for certain when I was writing that.
But it sounds like a significant emotional event.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I never forgot it, obviously. And it's just as vivid in my memory as, anything.
And what I was thinking is, they're so desperate, but they still had their family intact. So now we have these refugees coming in, and you're destroying the one unit that they have left.
Think of that baby that was made to go before the judge. What was it, a 3-year-old baby with no translator and is supposed to have the voice of an advocate.
The stories that are coming out of these camps is just astounding. And the federal government wants to make a case that they don't need to provide soap or toothpaste or just creature comforts in general for these children. So
it's beyond obscene.
Unbelievable.
Well, let me change the color of the. let me get us for at least a minute out of the shade. This little one is called My Most Embarrassing Experience. I never had the assignment in high school of having to write an essay for an English class. Usually, most people have to do this for ninth grade English, of write an essay or a story. My most embarrassing experience. So I thought, well, many years later, I would redress that absence in my personal history. So this is something that I dredged up from my college years at the University of Michigan. My most embarrassing experience. I was a farm boy in the honors college at the University of Michigan. I was tall. I was skinny. I was always hungry. Despite the fact that I was eating 5 meals per day, I only weighed about 150 pounds. I suppose I looked like Ichabod Crane. But I was in the honors college, and I was being treated with deference in unexpected circles. Having made friends with the sons of several families that had made their millions in the automotive industry, I had begun to be invited to highfalutin parties, where my expected role was that of a clever conversationalist who could make implausible comments about cause and effect, and then back them up in an unexpected way. For example, I could ask a goofy question. How did a pathogenic fungus result in the entire Roman Catholic hierarchy in America being Irish? I then would launch into a spiel about Phytophthora infestans, the potato blight that caused the Great Irish Famine of 1845. Vast numbers of Irish Catholics immigrated to America, a largely Protestant country at the time. From the beginning, Catholic clergy in Eastern America have been Irish. Ergo, a fungal potato blight is the cause of Catholic cardinals. Even though I had participated in only half a dozen such parties, they were enough to make me become quite sophisticated. Oh, so sophisticated. No one suspected I was a farm boy who had failed at cultivation with a horse. I had shaken the clods from my boots. The gold-embossed invitation arrived in my mailbox at the main desk on East Quad, the dormitory in which I had managed to obtain a private room. Little did I realize at the time, the mail clerk from whom I had requested my mail would one day become my wife. We would be married for over 48 years. The invitation was from the Honors College. Next week, on Friday, Eleanor Roosevelt would be speaking at Hill Auditorium about the United Nations. The university would be hosting a banquet in her honor at the League several hours before her lecture. The following Saturday, the Honors College would be hosting a reception for Mrs. Roosevelt after her tour of the university's nuclear laboratories. I was invited to attend. RSVP. Wow! Have I arrived or what? Along with my childhood hero, Albert Schweitzer, Eleanor Roosevelt was among the handful of people I admired the most in all the world. In accord with a clock neurosis I contracted in high school, my internal clock has always been set forward half an hour, and so I arrived at the reception venue 35 minutes early. No one was at the reception post at the entrance yet, although the entry door was unlocked. I entered the building and quickly found the large room in which the reception was to be held. As I entered the room, caterers were finishing up placement of the coffee urns on a 15-foot table. Punch bowls, petit fours, eclairs, tiny cream puffs, and gorgeous exotic desserts for which I had no name had already been set out. As the caterers were leaving, I walked over to the table and began to walk around it to inspect the delicacies. Those tiny cream puffs would have to be eaten all in one bite, I thought to myself. If I try to bite off just a piece, it might shatter. That would be embarrassing. I walked to the other side of the table to get a closer look at some cashew-clustered dainties. A door in the far wall opened up, and 5 people entered the room. President Harlan Hatcher, accompanied by 3 Secret Service officers, were escorting Eleanor Roosevelt into the reception hall. There's Mrs. Roosevelt. What should I say to her? Wow, I think those tiny cakes are called petit fours. I was the only other person in the room when someone opened the entry door on the left wall to set up an entry post at which to inspect invitations. Mrs. Roosevelt and President Hatcher walked across the room, straight, toward me. What am I going to say? How did they make that purple frosting? Should I greet her or introduce myself first? The acme of graciousness, Eleanor was smiling at me as she drew near. Mom always said she was horse-faced, all those teeth. Should I get coffee before the cakes? How many desserts is it proper to take? I'll welcome her to Ann Arbor. And then, the most famous woman in the world, other than Queen Elizabeth, was standing about 3 feet away from me on the other side of the table. It's time for me to greet her now. I smiled nervously and opened my mouth to say, welcome. No word emerged. Instead, an arc, a jet of saliva shot out from beneath my tongue. The catapulted liquid flew straight forward, then curved precipitously downward. It splattered on the linen tablecloth exactly midway between 2 rows of desserts. Don't pass out. You've got to welcome her. Eleanor Roosevelt's dignity wasn't dented at all. Certainly she had seen it, but she didn't look at the table. Instead, graciously, she pretended she hadn't seen anything. Her denture-like smile widened as she directed her eyes to my face. Welcome to Ann Arbor, Mrs. Roosevelt. We in the Honors College are truly honored by your willingness to take time from your packed schedule to visit us. Suddenly, I was playing the role of official greeter for the Honors College. As saliva soaked out from the impact site, coming closer and closer to the tiny plates of dainties on either side, I improvised a small welcome speech. President Hatcher was grinning. As far as I was aware, that was something no one had ever seen before. He, too, of course, had seen it all. About 50 students now were flooding into the room and coming toward the table. Mrs. Roosevelt, would you please do us the honor of beginning the refreshment line? The reception lasted less than an hour, and all the desserts were consumed, except for 3 on either side of the impact site. I finished them off in 6 bites.
Before we go any further, we better thank you, Frank. Before we go any further, we better remind people they're listening to The Other Side of the News with Dr. Bob Fitrakis.
WGRN 94.1 and WCRS 92.7
and 98.3. Yes, indeed. So, Frank, your book is awesome to me. I really enjoy the stories.
It's going off to the printer next week.
But the amazing thing to me sitting here listening is we haven't talked about the non-existence of a higher power much.
Well, I'm not sure which higher power you're talking about. Are you talking about the Supreme Court of the United States?
Well,
or
we could.
Maybe the United Nations.
Right.
Is that what? Okay.
No, I was
The
thinking
World Court?
The World Court.
Yeah. I was thinking of Poseidon.
Oh.
No, I'm just throwing out some god names. It's just that because you're an atheist, that's what I expected to hear instead of these great tales of your life. But this is good stuff.
Well, there are some. There's
it ties
one
in.
fairly long memoir about how I was forced to give up a 20-year career in teaching at the State University of New York.
For being gay or for being an atheist?
For being an atheist. Well, no, nobody at that time.
So you were out of the closet as an atheist.
Oh, yeah.
But not in terms of your sexuality.
No. I mean, I
why was
led 2
that?
completely separate lives sexually. Anne knew about me because we had dated the same guy.
Wow.
But
About the sharing of the spit.
well, yeah, it was kind of weird. But no, I became an atheist activist in 1959, just before I turned 20. So I became really, then a debater and very, very activist person for the atheist cause, all through the second half of the 20th century.
So you found it easier
Oh, yeah.
to come out as an
Yeah,
atheist
yeah.
than to come out as being bisexual
Yeah,
or
yeah,
however
yeah,
you describe yourself.
yeah. Curiously, though, I mean, I received many, many death threats over the years. I kind of stopped counting at 50, but
Right. Yeah. Well, that's good. That's a good age to stop counting such things.
So why
You've lived
come
that
out,
long.
Why come out at 80?
well, I just was feeling very guilty about having deceived so many of my friends. Not that it had to do with the sexuality per se, but the deception all these years that I was perpetuating. And I just felt that finally, before I cash my chips in, I have to have at least a year or two of of clean conscience.
Having heard
Right.
you read parts of your memoirs
Yeah.
involved with your sexuality, it seems you ran across numerous people that may have been hiding some of their sexual orientation as well.
Sure, yeah.
And it also seems that you're saying that even though you're an atheist, you still have a conscience and you can make moral decisions. Wow, that's what a concept.
You know, you haven't asked me the important question
Yes.
that was always asked of me in every radio or television interview that I would do up until 1998 or 1999. Within the first 3 or 4 questions, there would be this one. Well, now, Frank, you're an atheist. Are you also a communist?
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Up until 98 or 99.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Bob, are you a communist, or have you ever been?
Oh, I'm have a Marxian analysis. I read books and
Ah.
they make sense to me.
Communist
I adopt
plus.
certain perspectives.
Yes,
So yeah,
indeed.
I am a democratic socialist, for the record, one of the founders of the Democratic Socialist of America, which again was always open to people with different orientations. And again, so you're on your 80th birthday, you come out and friends and acquaintances,
Yeah.
and you kind of went into some detail. Was it cathartic?
Extremely so. I have to say, though, I don't remember when I have ever been so nervous preparatory to speaking or reading. I've harangued many thousands of people on the mall in Washington, D.C. without a twinge of anxiety, but that was the most anxiety-filled evening I've had.
Why do you think it was? Why do you think there was so much, after all you've been through?
Well, the length of my deception of so many of my colleagues and how they were going to react to it, that was a real worry.
right.
What was the reaction? Yeah,
It was very, very affirmative. I mean, as you saw, I got a standing ovation, and a lot of people came up afterwards. There were 103 people there, and they hugged me and reassured me. So it was all very, 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 very wonderful.
All right. Hey, we've really only got about a minute left, and we want to remind everybody to go to the vigil tonight at the State House. Also, pick up a free press, which covers the same topic of the migrants, and close the Trump camps. Bob, you also, and Bob Bites Back, write about abolish ICE, right?
indeed.
Et cetera, et cetera. The struggle goes on.
And make sure you buy Frank Zindler's book, well
Absolutely.
worth the
It'll be
read.
out at the end of August.
End of August. There you go.
All right, and again, the name of the book.
Confessions of a Born-Again Atheist.
There you go.
All right, and where can people get that?
It'll be on Amazon.
All right. So we have,
All right.
again, it looks like we're out of time. And it now
All right.
seems to be easier to be.
We didn't even get to talk about Rip Torn dying, but anyway.
Bisexual or have eclectic sexual proclivities than it is to be an atheist. True or false? Is it, I mean, there's this
True.
I
sign-
plead the fifth.
Thanks.
All right.
Death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed minds.